Imagine it's the year 1327, and you've spent your whole life on this land, your weathered cottage, the lean-to barn where your cattle low, and the laughter of your children echoing between the furrows your father and grandfather once plowed. Here, your name is carved on every fence post, every field seems to bear your stamp. Yet in the Middle Ages, no charter or seal could truly shield you, a lord, invoking obscure dues, ancient fines, or hidden clauses, could legally, but ruthlessly, lay claim to everything you hold dear. Stay with me, and you'll learn how. Imagine it is Midsummer's Eve, 1327. You have risen before dawn to the braying of your old mare, Branna, and the scrape of leather as you fasten her harness. A thin gray light creeps over the barley stubble, and you taste cold metal on your tongue from the bit of your plow. Today you should be at Lord Rodolph's motte, arrayed in your jerkin and leather coif, ready to ride with the rest of the FYRD, the levy of able-bodied men, across the moor to answer your liege's call. But you have no horse fit for war, no spare armor, and the journey will cost coin you do not possess. You trudge down the rutted lane, clutching the simple vellum writ that arrived yesterday. By the grace of God and by right of fealty, you are summoned to serve in my company beneath the standard of the White Boar upon Michaelmas next. Fail not, on pain of forfeiture. You pause by the boundary posts, two weathered oaks carved with your family's mark, wondering how a summons penned in parchment might take more of your fields than any sword. Along the way, you meet Elston, your neighbor, whose lean face reflects the same worry. He tells you in a hushed voice, 10 men rode in yesterday to count those summoned. They say the bailiff will come at dawn to seize those absent. By the time you reach the motte, the bailey is alive with horses stamping, with banners snapping in the wind, a sea of green and white, half the shire called out to muster. Yet your name is absent from the list the clerk unwinds on a portable table beneath a tarpaulin. When you ask why, he glances up with an expression that fills your chest with ice. You were recorded as not present. Hence, by the ancient custom of arrest, half your croft is forfeit to my lord until you make good your service. Your heart hammers. You imagine the plough resting idle in your field, your wife's loom quiet, the granary echoing with empty hush. Arrears, you murmur, this is no debt of coin but of obligation. You had meant to ride, but rain rot had eaten your lean mare, borrowed tethered horses from Thora's kin, and they got away in the marsh. You had sent word, but no answers came. The bailiff extends a hand like iron and unfolds a small board marked with chalk. It bears your name, the measure of your holding, 2 vergats of land, and the words, forfeited until service completed. You bend your head without protest. In that moment, the law feels sharper than any blade. You can neither plow nor sow half your fields, and the lean harvest of autumn will be halved, too. As you turn away, the bailiff's clerk tucks the writ and the tally into his jerkin. On the road back, the sun breaks through ragged clouds. You clutch the shaft of your plow and press your knee into Branna's side, urging her forward. As you pass under the shadow of the motte, you glimpse banners still snapping and hear the tramp of armed men over the ridge. Behind you, the bailiff's silhouette lingers, watching, ledger in hand. What will you offer in reparation? How will you raise a spare horse? Or must you sell a ewe, your last breeding female, to fund a smith's repairs to your bridle? You know only that, once more, the soil you thought yours has slipped through your fingers, stolen by nothing more than a summons, a chalk mark, and the stern voice of custom. And yet, what other writs lie waiting in the Lord's chest, ready to claim even more of what you hold dear? If you enjoyed my stories, please subscribe to my channel and let me know what you liked and what you didn't like so that I can improve my stories. You can also write where you are from, as I would be interested to know. You have not the breath to greet the dawn before you find yourself once again before the Lord's gates. this time not summoned by writ of service, but driven by the silent weight of what you owe. It is the eve of Michaelmas, 1327, and the chill in the air bites sharper than any blade. You clutch in one hand a sheaf of barley, in the other a small, worn token of silver. Neither will satisfy what you have pledged. 3 seasons passed. When the great murrain swept through the shire and famine hung over every homestead, you turned to your local moneylender for relief. In his dimly lit booth your hand trembled as you signed the parchment. In exchange for 3 measures of milled grain and a loan of 2 pence, you offered half your apple orchard and the rights to glean fallen ears after harvest. You thought it a mercy then, better the orchard than the cold, empty belly of your children. But when the grain was measured, it was found short by a bushel, and the silver coin bore the tiny nick of a forger. The lender, a man of sharp tongue and sharper pen, declared your pledge delinquent before the ink was dry. He took the grain back. He seized the silver. And now, by his account, you stand in debt beyond measure. You push open the heavy doors of the court of the manor, your cloak damp with dew and worry. Torches gutter in black iron sconces. The murmur of voices swells like a storm. To your left, a widow pleads for mercy over her daughter's dowry. To your right, a vintner begs to keep his press. Ahead, behind a rush-strewn dais, sits the steward, flanked by 2 bailiffs whose cuirasses glint with the torchlight. Their eyes pin you to the spot. Master Harlan, the steward announces, voice echoing against stone, reading from a fat roll of parchment. You stand before this court for failure to discharge your debt. In the bond you acknowledge that half your orchard, the 20 standard trees planted by your own father, would remain with the lender until full payment. That time has long passed. You swallow the catch in your throat. The orchard lies a half-mile from here, along the brook where foxglove blooms. You imagine the sturdy trunks, knotted and scarred, still heavy with late summer fruit. You see your children running between rows of coarse grass, their bare feet kicking up the scent of earth and decay. By your own hand you granted the fruits of that orchard to my lord's creditor. The steward continues. Therefore I decree, take nothing from this harvest but what is necessary to your bare sustenance. The rest belongs now to the lender, unless full recompense is made by Candlemas. A bailiff steps forward, unrolling a tally board. He flicks chalk across its surface, marking off each tree in turn, tree 1, tree 2, tree 3. Each mark feels like a nail driven into your heart. You try to speak, to explain how the plagues and lean years made coin impossible, how you patched your roof with rags and sold the ewe to buy salt, but your voice is swallowed by the echoing hall. Instead, you stand silent as the bailiff seals your fate with a nod. Outside, the orchard awaits. In 3 nights' time, torches will march among the trees, cutting down the deadwood and hauling the best harvest to the granary of the moneylender. You will be permitted only the husks and pruning scraps. Within these bounds of parchment and pen, your livelihood will be clipped like the branches of your own trees. You step back into the damp night, the tally board's chalk still clinging to your mind. The steward's words follow you down the lane. Until Candlemas, you shall eat only barley porridge twice a day, and these fields yield their grain to another. In the distance, a lone owl cries. You press your free hand against your belly, where hunger has already begun to gnaw. Tomorrow, you must decide whether to seek a new loan, pledging your very cottage, or to walk the roads in search of work, leaving your family behind. And yet, through it all, you feel the cold finality of legal bond, how a single signature could transform the soil beneath your feet into a stranger's keepsake. Imagine it is midwinter, 17 days before Candlemas in the year 1328. The sky above your holding is slate gray, and the wind that scours the moor carries the tang of frost from the distant fens. You stand before the half-frozen brook that marks the edge of your father's homestead, staring at the brittle reeds and the shards of ice that dance downstream. Today, you are orphaned. Your father fell by fever last autumn, and your 6-year-old daughter, Emlyn, is now heir to everything you own: the cottage, the fields, the lean sheepfold where you once kept a dozen ewes. But in this age, an heir of tender years is no owner. Before the first torch of Candlemas has guttered out, the bailiff rides up from the manor with a writ stamped by your liege lord's seal. He dismounts into the brittle snow, his boots crunching like bones, and lays the writ before you and the small knot of neighbors who have come to accompany you. By the custom of wardship, he reads in a voice as cold as the wind: Emlyn Harlan, sole heir of the late Master Harlan, being under the age of 14, is placed under the guardianship of Lord Radulf. Henceforth, the Lord claims the custody of her person, the profits of her lands, and the right to arrange her marriage. Your breath fogs the air as you stare down at the writ. You feel the blood drain from your cheeks. The words whirl through your mind like the snowflakes around you. Profits of her lands. The pasture where you fattened your lambs, the little patch of flax you sowed with your wife's deft hands, every harvest, every grazing ewe, every penny rendered from that land now belongs not to your child, but to the man in the motte, who will reap the yield until she comes of age. You look at Emlyn, bundled in a faded woolen cloak 2 sizes too big, her cheeks red and eyes wide. She grips your hand, her knuckles pale. You wish to scoop her into your arms and vanish into the drift, but every motion is weighed by despair. You may remain on the holding as bailiff for the Lord's interest, on condition you deliver the annual rent of 20 pence, and full account of wool and grain by term. The bailiff continues. Failure will bring distraint of goods and further fine. You know what this means. Last harvest, you eked out 12 sheaves of barley beyond the tithe. This year, that surplus will vanish. The wool shorn from your sheep, garments for Emlyn and your wife, will be sold at the manor's auction to the highest bidder. And as for Emlyn herself, you hide your face as the bailiff glances at the child. Her future betrothal, whatever dowry might be negotiated, is now as much a commodity as the flax. Later, in the dim light of the cottage, you and your wife, Marin, huddle over the hearth. The embers hiss in the brazier, and the only warmth is the hush of smoke curling toward the rafters. Marin presses a rough hand against the hearthstone, as though to draw comfort from the earth. She murmurs, "Could we send her to the nuns at St. Agnes? At least there she might learn to read." But that choice is not yours. The Lord will decide whether Emlyn goes to cloistered care or remains within his own household. He may choose a knight's widow whose hearth is snug and whose loyalty is proven, or he may simply sell her wardship to the highest bidder, each year's revenues lining his purse. You lean back against the rough-hewn wall, the ropes of straw mattress creaking under your weight. The cottage feels suddenly hollow without your father's steady presence, without your daughter laughing as she chased the barn cats across the floor. You close your eyes and recall the summer evenings when you taught her to tally coins by the candlelight, promising to take her to market when the fields lay bare. That promise now belongs to another. Night deepens. The wind rattles the shutters. Somewhere in the keep, a clerk is tallying wool, oats, and lambskins by lamplight, scoring Emlyn's inheritance into the ledger as profit for the Lord. You press your palm to the hearth, longing to feel the warmth of your own hearthstone, yet knowing it has already been mortgaged by custom and black ink. Behind you, a fox's cry echoes across the moor, a forlorn sound, hunting in the deep of winter. You think of Emlyn, alone in some far-off chamber, her small body shivering without her family's arms. You think of your wife, forced to kneel at hocks and harrows with no grain to sow, and you wonder, what price must you pay to reclaim your daughter's freedom? How many winters will pass before Emlyn stands of age and can claim her birthright? And if, in the rearing and withering of seasons, you cannot raise the silver to redeem her wardship, what then becomes of her, and of all you once called yours? What path will you choose, pleading mercy at the manor gate, forging a bond with a neighbor's scribe, or wandering the roads in search of coin to ransom your child? The winter is long, and the writ is unyielding. Imagine it is All Hallows Eve, 1328. The sun slips behind low clouds and the wind carries a hint of rot from the hedgerow blackberries. You stand before the crumbling gateway of your family's homestead, the latch hanging loose on its hinges, the slate roof mottled with lichen. Inside, the hearth is grown cold. Your cousin Joran went to tend the sheep at dawn and never returned. You searched the barrowlands and moorland paths, but found no sign beyond her footprints fading into the bracken. In the distance, the manor's horn sounds twice, its mournful call echoing across the valley. You know what that summons means. Ever since your grandfather's line failed, long ago, when the pestilence carried off his only son, this farm has rested uneasily under your care, always one generation away from extinction. Now that your last kin has vanished, your holding stands heirless, and therefore forfeit. You walk the narrow lane toward Lord Rodolph's manor, the damp earth sucking at your boots. Along the way, you pass broken stakes that once marked your boundary, your late father's hand-carved symbol nearly worn away by rain, and wonder if anyone remembers whose land this was meant to be. In the bailey, the steward sits perched on a wooden bench, under a makeshift canopy of oiled cloth. A crowd of neighbors gathers, their breaths pluming in the chill air. "Master Harlan," the steward intones, voice flat as the marsh beyond the walls. "It has come to my lord's attention that no lawful heir remains for the lands known as Harlan's Croft. By the custom of Escheat, that holding reverts to the direct domain of Lord Radulf, to be managed and profited from at his sole discretion." The words strike you like a blackened flint. Escheat, you murmur, this old English term meaning to fall back. It is the very mechanism by which soil without a seed returns to its sower. Your seed, planted in sweat and tears, now belongs to another. You stand silent as the steward's clerk produces a length of white chalk and begins to draw lines on a slate board. Escheat, Harlan's Croft, 20 vergats. Each chalk stroke severs a measure of your heritage. A bailiff steps forward to hand you the writ sealed with crimson wax and the Lord's signet, an ivory boar on a field of black. Herein is declared that from this All Hallows Eve forward, Harlan's Croft shall be held by Lord Radulf and no other. Any trespassers will be dealt with as felons, the bailiff warns, voice low but lethal. You want to cry out that your father built these walls, that your mother's prayers once warmed this hearth, but the words stick in your throat. Instead, you turn to look at the faces around you, old Etta, whose barley you once bartered for cheese, Tom the miller, whose will ground your wheat, little Hilda, who used to chase butterflies through the barley stubble. Their eyes flicker with pity and fear. Some cast furtive glances at the manor soldiers leaning on their pikes, a silent reminder of the power arrayed behind that writ. Night falls. Torches flare along the manor's outer walls, and a lantern-bearing bailiff leads a team of hay wagons up the broken cart track toward your fields. You follow at a distance, clutching the chalky slate board as if it were a lifeline. Your wife, Marin, trails behind you, her shawl wrapped tight against the mist. Her face is pale and drawn, and you see the same unspoken horror in her eyes, that the farm where you once hoped your children would bury you is now a place you cannot call your own. At the edge of the barley field, the bailiff taps the sheaf of wheat he holds, an ear stripped of grain. "This," he says to the gathering of men and women, "is the last you shall reap from these lands. All other produce will fill my lord's granaries." The wagons creak beneath loads of sheaves, and 2 hulking servants heft sacks of oats and barley onto the cardboards. From the gloom, you hear the steady chop of a billhook as foliage is cut for winter fodder, the smoke of burning brambles curling up into the murk. The smell of scorched ivy mingles with damp straw. You take a step forward, but Tom lays a hand on your arm. "Let them finish," he murmurs. "There is no writ here that can be undone, not by us." You plant your boot in the churned earth, feeling the memory of your father's plowshare in every clod. You taste the acrid tang of smoke and loss upon your tongue. Then, as the final cart crests the rise, laden with the fruits of your family's labor, you feel a stubborn ember kindle deep in your chest, a question burning as bright as torchlight in the dark. What rights have passed to you, when your birthright falls like grain through a lord's sieve? Imagine it is early spring, the feast of St. George, in the year 1329. You stand at the edge of the royal wood, where your fields give way to a cathedral of slender beeches and moss-hung oaks. The air is sweet with the sap rising in young shoots, and you carry a small bundle of kindling, fallen branches you meant only to gather for your hearth fire. Your breath puffs pale in the dawn light, and the soft drip of melting frost echoes through the silent aisles of the forest. Since time out of mind, your family has drawn fuel from this fringe of the king's domain, twig and brush for cooking, small limbs for smithing nails. You learned as a child to distinguish dead wood from living bark, to leave the sap-rich boughs standing. But winter's hunger was fierce this year. Your wife's cough grew without end, and your granary lay bare after 2 lean harvests. The barn's rafters already groan when the wind wails through. So, before dawn, you slipped beneath the canopy, lantern in hand, seeking enough deadfall to boil gruel for your children. As you stooped to free a branch from the bramble, a sudden crack sounded behind you, sharp as a crossbow. You spin, lantern swinging, and there he stands, the forester, clad in leather and deer hide, a long staff in one gauntlet hand, the other resting on the pommel of his short sword. His face is drawn and merciless beneath a cap of squirrel fur. "Who treads my lord's forest before sunrise?" he hisses, eyes glinting like embers. "Have you no leave, no written warrant?" You swallow against dryness in your throat. "I beg your pardon," you stammer, "but I meant only to gather deadwood for my hearth. My children have nothing to burn." He steps closer, and the light from your lantern flickers across his blade. "No man may take so much as an acorn or a wild berry without the king's license, or so the forest code decrees." He brandishes a slender scroll, sealed in green wax. "This writ confers upon my lord the right to enforce the burgesy of the wood. You are in breach of forest law." Your heart sinks. You recall the ancient statutes taught by your father, how all wild game, all timber growing in the vert and venison, belongs by right to the crown, and is held in trust by the local magnate. You had thought those rules applied only to large game hunts and to cutting whole trees. But the forester sees otherwise. He unfurls the scroll and reads, "Whereas the peace of the forest and the profit of the crown must be maintained, no subject shall gather wood, catch hare or fowl, or pasture beasts within royal confines, without explicit grant of safe conduct and payment of pannage and herbage dues. Offenders shall forfeit the produce of their lands and pay a fine to the keep." The words ring in the hush of the wood. He motions to 2 bow-bearing guards who step silently from the shadows. The nearest guard levels an arrow across his bowstring, point resting against the palm of his gloved hand. You step back, lantern swinging wild, and watch as the glow casts dancing shapes on the tree trunks. "By my lord's command," the forester continues, "you are to surrender the rights of your entire east meadow, 2 acres by measure of the furlong. From this day until the next Michaelmas, you shall neither graze cattle nor sow seed upon that ground, nor gather any frond or berry. All shall enrich the woodward's coffer." A guard strides forward with a towel board and chalk. He inscribes, For forest breach, East Meadow, 2 acres, forfeited to the woodward until All Hallows Eve. Each scratch of chalk upon wood feels like the snapping of a sapling underfoot. You drop to your knees, lantern's light quavering across your face. Surely, you begin, voice trembling. Surely a lord's forester cannot claim my East Meadow, my only winter pasture. The forester's only reply is a hard nod. The law is plain. You stand, limbs slack, and watch as they turn and vanish among the trunks, leaving you alone in the swirl of early mist. The forest floor is silent once more, the dew gleaming like tears on each leaf. Across the rise you see the fence posts that mark your meadow's border, now the frontier of loss. You lift your eyes to the sun, hidden behind a veil of shaken leaves. You taste the acrid tang of fear mingled with pine resin. Tomorrow, when your sheep shiver unsheltered at the gate, you will plead with the reeve at the manor to release your rights. But you know that plea will fall upon parchment and pen, not pity. Already, grief and indignation flare within you. How easily the green world you thought free could be fenced and sold, measured by feet of chalk and rid of ink. How thin the veil between the wild and the Lord's command. Imagine it is Lammas Day, 1329, and the sun blazes down upon your village green, baking the dust into a faint haze. You stand before the open doors of the manor hall, your shoulders heavy beneath the coarse wool of your tunic. In your hands you clutch a leather purse, its few coins clinking oddly, as if startled by the noise they make. You came today not by summons for service nor by writ for debt, but by summons to answer a complaint laid against you by your own neighbor. The manor court, known to all as the court baron, sits beneath wooden beams blackened by age and smoke. Straw-strewn benches line the walls, and a low dais holds the steward's chair, carved with the Lord's boar emblem. There, the steward presides, robes drawn tight, eyes hawkish behind a bristling beard. On either side of him stand 2 bailiffs, their halberds resting at ease but ever at the ready. Against the back wall, a single torch flickers, casting the room in shifting shadows. You step into the hush, feeling every villager's glance upon you. To your left, the widow Elsworth clutches her shawl. Across the aisle, Tom the miller mumbles prayers to himself. At the center, your accuser, Roland the shepherd, stands with arms folded, chin raised. His coarse cloak of dyed wool marks him as one of the better-off tenants. Between you, a rough-hewn table bears a heap of barley sheaves, the very same you delivered late to the barn last harvest. The steward clears his throat. "Master Harlan," he says, voice echoing off stone. "Roland of the East Pasture claims that you failed to deliver your tithe of sheaves by Midsummer's Eve, contrary to custom and to your sworn obligation. He demands redress and a fine for the inconvenience and dishonor thus caused." You feel the heat of the crowd upon your back. You had been delayed by the spring floods, the mill's wheel jammed by driftwood, and by the fever that laid low your eldest son. You wrote to the bailiff, but your letter came back sealed and unanswered. Today, you hope to offer your apology, perhaps plead for extra days to gather the grain, but you did not expect public shame or a fine that might swallow your meager purse. Roland steps forward, voice loud. "My lord, I had to rent a cart from the miller to haul in my father's barley on your behalf, for you were tardy. The cart cost 3 pence, and the grain was rained upon, spoiling half the sheaves. Justice demands compensation, by loss and by penalty." A bailiff produces a tally board. With slow, deliberate strokes he chalks. "Late tithe, 3 bushels of barley, compensation, 3d, penalty, 2d." 2 separate columns. You feel each mark like a branded seal upon your flesh. The steward surveys the board, then fixes you with a cold gaze. "You acknowledge these sums?" he asks. You swallow, voice small. I do, my lord, though hardship." Hardship is no excuse in this court. The steward interrupts. He taps the board. By the custom of fee fine, you owe 5 pence, a sum to be paid at Martinus. Failure to pay will result in distraint of goods, your cow, your loom, or whatever may satisfy this claim. Your purse feels suddenly empty in your hand. 5 pence is more coin than you have seen since Candlemas. To raise it, you would need to sell your cow, the very animal that draws your plough, and then what of next year's seed? You try to steady your breath, but your heart hammers against ribs as though begging for mercy. Murmurs ripple through the onlookers. You see frightened glances, fear that the next complaint, real or manufactured, could pick apart every obligation until nothing remains. Your wife and children lean against the wall, eyes wide. Your eldest son, Jonas, bites his lip, the bruise on his cheek from last night's fever still purple. The steward leans forward. Take heed, he warns. This manor court holds you to the letter of custom. Let no man claim ignorance of its writs. He raps his gavel, an iron-bound mallet, against the bench. The sound cracks like a whip. You bow your head. The steward dismisses you with a wave, and the bailiffs step forward to note the judgment in the court roll. You pick up your purse, coins rattling forlornly, then step out into the glare of midday. The world seems suddenly smaller, every pathway hemmed in by obligation and oversight. On the road home, you pause at the fence where your neighbor's sheep graze. You recall the winter nights when you both shared fireside tales, wondered at distant wars, and dreamed of children's futures. Now you know those ties can be severed by a single complaint, a single chalk mark on a board. Your cow waits in the byre, lowing softly. Your loom stands idle in the corner, the shuttle unmoved. You taste copper on your tongue, ill omens of coins slipping through your fingers. In the distance, a shepherd's whistle carries across the field. You look toward Roland's homestead, wondering what grievance he will conjure next. Imagine it is midsummer's dawn, 1330, when the sun's first breath gilds the horizon and the air bristles with promise. Your fields lie before you, rows of barley whispering in the breeze, a promise of loaves to come. Yet at the far edge, where your father's furrows met the common waste, wild grasses and bramble have crept in, choking what was once pasture. You have watched them spread for seasons, and last night, unable to sleep beneath the weight of hunger, you stole out with a hand axe, lantern swinging, to carve a few extra feet of tillable ground beyond the ancient hedge. At dawn, you stand in the newly cleared strip, soft earth warm beneath your boots, where you sank the axe's blade again and again. You taste the copper tang of sweat and earth upon your tongue, hear the hollow thud of roots giving way to blade, smell the sharp bite of cut grass mingled with dew. In your hands the axe's half thumps like a heartbeat, a pulse of new hope. 2 extra yards here, enough for another row of beans to feed your children through the lean months. But as the light strengthens, you glimpse across the ridge the thin white line of boundary stakes, stones set centuries past, chipped with your family's mark. The new fro you sunk lies just beyond them, claiming land the manor's surveyors never granted. A knot of unease coils in your stomach. You kneel to brush away dirt from the nearest stake. The carved boar's head glares back at you, a silent witness. Encroachment. You whisper, recalling the steward's words, any subject who extends his arable beyond his assigned measure commits an injury against his lord's domain. You rise, lantern still in hand, and turn toward the low silhouette of the manor, its towers rising like dark sentinels. Before you can flee, a shout echoes from the hedgerow. A bailiff, his face hidden beneath a hood, steps into view, staff in hand. Behind him, 2 men-at-arms lean on pikes. They advance slowly, boots crushing the brambles you cast aside. You stand, heart pounding beneath your woolen doublet. Hold, the bailiff commands. His voice is as firm as oak. He strides across the new earth, lantern light glancing off his cuirass. He stops at the stake, eyes narrowing. What is this? He taps the soil with the butt of his staff. Whose work here? Your throat tightens. You consider running, leaving axe and lantern behind, but know that flight would be seen as confession. You bow your head. My lord, you say, voice rough with dust. My children go hungry, and the bramble choke the old edges. I cleared this ground for seed, for sustenance. The bailiff's gaze sweeps over your bowed shoulders, then glances at the two soldiers easing forward. By the statute of encroachment, he says, voice low, any person who infringes upon the waste, encloses, or tills any part thereof must forfeit the entire parcel. Not just these new yards, but your whole field if my lord so wills. You swallow, taste the dryness of the morning on your tongue. Surely. You start, but the bailiff cuts you off with a gesture. He removes a length of chalk from his belt and draws a line on the bare earth, encircling your newly tilled furrow. The chalk gleams white against the brown soil. He then extends a hand, offering a small tablet of wood inscribed with the steward's seal. Here is the order of forfeiture. This strip, and all that lies within its chalk bounds, is forfeit to Lord Radulf. You may reclaim nothing thereof, nor till it further, nor reap its grain. The words fall like stones. You imagine the beans you meant to sow, emerald shoots promising summer feasts, now destined to wither beneath another's care. You feel pinch of cold sweat at your temples as you watch the bailiff kick at the bramble, ordering the men-at-arms to heap it back over your plot, to erase your labor. Behind you, the barley stalks sway, golden and indifferent. The world seems to hold its breath. Your axe lies buried in the weeds you cleared. You reach to pull it free, but a soldier steps forward and wedges a spear between its haft and the earth, trapping it like a worm beneath a boot. You stand there, axe half loosed, hands trembling. You taste the dust of defeat on your lips. You think of your children, waiting for you to return with news of food in the granary, and your wife, whose loom lies idle. At the manor gates, the bailiff relocks the chalk circle, sealing it with a ribbon of red wax. The edges of the plot, your plot, rustle with dead bramble and clay. You exhale, the breath trembling from your chest. As you turn to go, you feel the weight of every step on ground that is no longer yours. Imagine it is the high feast of Pentecost, 1330, when the air hums with the promise of summer and the cathedral bells ring for vespers. You approach the keep at dusk, the torchlight flickering along its battlements like restless spirits. In your hand you clutch a summons, not for service nor for debt, but for a hearing in the chamber of records. You arrive knowing not whether to hope or to fear. A call to inspect ancient rolls might herald restoration, or final ruin. The records chamber lies deep within the castle's heart, corridors narrowing until you stand before a stout oak door bound in iron. Beyond it, the smell of must and smoke mingles with the oily tang of lampblack. You push the door open, and the scriptorium's low light spills out, wooden desks strewn with quills, inkpots, and sheaves of parchment stacked like tombstones. A single brazier in the corner hisses, sending scarlet sparks curling toward the rafters. Behind a high bench sits the Lord's chief clerk, Master Aldred, tall, hawk-faced, eyes glinting beneath a mane of iron-gray hair. At his elbow stands the steward's junior, a youth of pale skin and restless hands. On the bench between them lies an open folio, pages yellowed and curled at the edges, each sheet bearing cramped Latin script in fading iron gall ink. You swallow, heart hammering in your ears. Master Harlan. Aldred begins, voice smooth as polished stone. You stand accused of unlawful tenure upon the lands known as Harlan's Croft and Orchard. The evidence is here, in two charters, one dated to the reign of King Edgar in 969, and a confirmation by King Henry in 1154. Both reveal that the lands were held in domain, by right of crown, and granted only in life interest, not in perpetuity. He points to the first charter, its seal long broken from the parchment. You lean forward, squinting at the archaic script. Edgar, by the grace of God King of the English, grants unto my faithful Thane Eswe the lands of, upon condition that they revert to the crown upon his death. Your blood turns cold. You recall your grandfather, who taught you the old borderlines, who swore that your ancestors held these fields by unbroken lineage since time beyond reckoning. You press a hand to your chest, as if to staunch the sudden rush of vertigo. Master Aldred turns the folio's brittle pages with slow care, till he finds the second charter. He clears his throat and reads, Henry, by the grace of God King of England, confirms to Lord Radulf, and to his heirs, all lands which were formerly held by the Thane Eswe, and decrees that no tenure save by royal grant may pass to any other party. The words hang in the gloom like a noose. Each syllable dissolves the foundation beneath your feet. You imagine the fields themselves dissolving into sand. How? You gasp. These cannot apply to my family's hold. Aldred's eyes flicker with something like pity. The law is plain, sir, he says, tapping the parchment. By these charters, the tenure you claimed was never heritable. It was, and remains, life-tenant only. Upon your father's death, the lands reverted to the crown, which then granted them to my lord. All your leases, your promises, your payments of servile dues, were in effect renewals of a temporary grace, not a perpetual right. You feel as though the air has been stolen from the room. You see the torch smoke swirl above Aldred's head, forming shapes of gallows and swaying bodies. You taste the acrid bite of fear on your tongue. Your vision swims with parchment and wax. But the scribe, you stammer, who falsified. The junior clerk shrugs, nervously flipping a page. I know not, sir. These charters have lain hidden in the king's exchequer, sealed from inspection. It was my duty to produce them at the steward's command, though I confess I know not how long they were kept from you. Your hands tremble as you reach for the folio, mind reeling with the implications. Every crop you sowed, every calf you fattened, every fine you paid, all rendered moot by a single stroke of the quill centuries past. You imagine the scribe's pen scratching out your family's name, weaving your heritage into a tapestry of lies. Aldred closes the folio with a slow, deliberate motion. The crack of its spine echoes like a death knell. By right of charter, he intones, Lord Radulf claims full legal possession of your fields and orchard. You shall vacate the holdings within a fortnight, removing all chattels save your bedding and clothes. Any further presence will be deemed trespass. A bailiff steps forward, passes you a sealed writ stamped with the ivory boar on black. The seal's edges press a cold circle of wax against your palm. You stare at it, as though expecting it to melt under your touch. You rise unsteadily, each breath a labor. Your cloak feels suddenly too heavy, as though sewn from lead. You step back toward the door, wincing at the creak of the oak floor. The torches flicker, and for a moment their light warps into the shape of scrolling script, of names crossed out in scarlet ink. You pause at the threshold, glancing back at the folio's blank pages, at Aldred's unreadable gaze. The door swings shut behind you with a final, echoing thud. Outside, the great hall lies silent but for the dripping of rain at its eaves. You press the wax writ against your heart, tasting smoke and ink on your lips. In your mind, two charters stand like sentries, barring every road back to your home. As you step into the chill night, rain beginning to patter on the cobbles, you feel the full weight of the clerk's web, a fabric of lies centuries old, now stretched tight to bind you. Imagine it is the sultry 8th day before Michaelmas in the year 1331. A low haze rests over your fields, and the late summer air is thick with the scent of ripening wheat and overripe apples. You have arisen before dawn to repair a broken hinge on your cottage door, its iron pin snapped clean by years of use. Your wife, Marin, sleeps still, her hair spread like a dark cloud across the pillow. Your 2 sons, Jonas and Emlyn, lie tangled in the blankets, skins flushed with sleep. For a moment you feel the small calm of home, until the horn sounds from the manor yard, shrill and insistent, cutting through the quiet like a blade. You slip from the cottage, bare feet whispering on dew-wet grass, and hurry toward the manor's gatehouse, where a single hornblower stands beneath the lintel, his cheeks puffed in morning light. Behind him, the great oak doors are flung wide, and the steward's banner, bearing the white boar, flutters in a sudden gust. A wooden board bears fresh chalk marks, summons for all tenants to appear. At high sun. By midday, you stand in the sunlit courtyard, squinting against glare off polished armor. Rough wooden benches hold your neighbors. Children peer from behind their mothers' skirts. On a raised platform beneath the portcullis, the steward sits flanked by 2 bailiffs. At his feet lies a small chest bound in iron. The steward's voice carries across the crowd. Tenants of Lord Radulf. He calls, you know the custom of relief, an heir's payment upon succession, and the aids due for your lord's need, marriage of his eldest daughter, knighting of his firstborn son, and ransom if he should fall in battle. These dues are invoked now. Heirlooms shall not exempt you. A murmur ripples through the tenants. You glance at the chest, it bears the lord's surcoat of arms, a leaping boar in relief. Your pulse quickens. You pinch your forearm to steady your breath. You had hoped this year's tithes, court fines, and forest penalties were the last exactions you would endure, a pittance spared of levy. Yet here comes another toll, unexpected as a viper's strike. The steward rises and unlocks the chest. He holds aloft a leather scroll, its wax seals still unbroken. By writ of relief, he reads, all heirs upon succession must render to their lord a sum equal to the value of their holding. Master Harlan, as lieutenant now succeeded by your daughter Emlyn's majority, you owe a relief calculated at 20 times the annual rent. Gasps and curses ripple through the throng. 20 times the annual rent, 20 years' worth of service or coin. You feel your heart lurch. You who have not seen even 10 pence beyond sowing and sowing again are now told to raise an entire lifetime's dues in one payment. Furthermore, the steward continues, for the marriage of Lady Isabel, 20 pence, for the knighting of Sir Hugo, 10 pence, and should our lord be taken by foes, a ransom of 30 pence must be provided. These aids are communal, each tenant shall bear his share by proportional measure. You stare at the tally board as chalk appears quickly under the bailiff's hand. Relief due by Emlyn's majority, 20 times annual rent, 20d. Aid for marriage of lord's daughter, 20d. Aid for knighting of lord's son, 10d. Aid for ransom of lord, 30d. Total per verdict, calculated by proportional share. Your stomach twists. 20 days past, you sold your last ewe to pay the forest toll. 2 seasons ago, you mortgaged your cottage to settle a manorial fine. Each year, new demands have battered your hearth. Now, like a final hammer blow, this summons threatens to shatter what remains. You glance at Marin, standing beside you, fingers twisting her apron's hem. Her eyes brim with tears. Behind her, Jonas and Emlyn watch with wide, frightened eyes. You bend to whisper, we will find a way, though the words taste like ash. The steward's gaze sweeps over the crowd. Let no man think these demands beyond his duty. He wraps a wooden mallet on the platform's edge. Pay by Martinmas, or face distraint of goods, sequestration of land, and imprisonment for contempt of writ. A bailiff thrusts a sealed writ into your hand, a parchment almost as heavy as your despair. You feel its weight cut through your body. Around you, other tenants clutch writs too, stepping away with hollow shoulders. The courtyard empties in sorrowful lines, feet stirring dust and scuffing the cobbles. You linger, hand on the gate's iron stud, listening to the echo of marching departures. A raven wheels overhead, cawing harshly. You taste the sour tang of fear and resolve mingled on your tongue. For the first time, you know that survival may demand more than sweat and toil. It may demand rebellion or ruin. Imagine it is early spring, the day before Palm Sunday in the year 1332. A pale sun struggles through an inland haze, and the breeze carries the tang of distant salt from the North Sea. You stand at the edge of your narrow lane, the damp earth sticky beneath your boots, as a radiant banner, the white rose of the king, approaches on a small retinue. Behind the standard-bearers ride 2 men-at-arms in tabards of royal blue, their spears dripping mud. Ahead of them, a clerk walks swiftly, brandishing a scroll sealed with the king's broad seal, a lion and fleur-de-lis entwined. Your heart hammers. You recognize the outriders of royal command. You have heard rumors of the king's new demands, that lords restore to tenants portions of land seized for the public weal, that they buy back confiscated holdings at fixed rates to fund castles on the northern marches. In taverns and market squares, men whisper of forced redemption, a chance at reprieve, but at a price many cannot meet. You clutch the handle of your lantern, waiting for the retinue to reach the manor's gate. By the time the party halts before Lord Rodolph's keep, a small crowd of tenants has gathered, men with hollowed cheeks, women clutching shawls, children clinging to their mothers' skirts. You join them, shoulders drawn tight. The king's clerk steps forward, unrolling his writ upon the marble lip of the gatehouse sill. His voice, carried over the hush, is clear and cold. By order of His Majesty King Edward III, to all tenants of the honor of Radulf, know that certain lands and manors were seized under writs of arrears, as cheat, aiding, and forest tolls. For the sake of royal defense and the support of the northern garrisons, His will is that each tenant may redeem 1 virgate of land previously confiscated, by payment of 3 times the annual rent in silver and delivery of 1 year's harvest in kind, before the feast of the Ascension. Any holding not redeemed by that day shall remain in the hands of Lord Radulf for the king's use. A murmur spreads through the tenants. 3 times the rent, 3 years' dues, in coin and grain. You taste bile rise in your throat. Your purse, once light, is now nearly empty, every penny pressed into forest tolls, reliefs, and fines. Your barn holds only a few sacks of barley, and the granary chest creaks hollow. You glance at Marin beside you, her eyes luminous in dawn's gray light. She tightens her fingers around the folds of her cloak. A bailiff calls your name from a tally board and signals you forward. You step to the gatehouse sill. The clerk holds out a knife, and you bristle. Are you to sign away your hopes once more? Instead, he dips his quill into ink and writes your name in the margin of the writ, marking you as present. Then he points to a ledger, open on a slender table. Virgate of land redeemed, 3 times annual rent 60. 1 year's grain, 4 bushels of barley and 2 of oats. Your throat constricts. 6 pence and 6 bushels, more grain than you have left. Your mind flashes back to the morning frost in Scene 1, the abandoned plough, to the bark of the forester in Scene 5, the stolen pasture, to the clerk's charters in Scene 8, the final writ of eviction. Each ordeal pressed you closer to ruin. The king's clerk inclines his head. Decide now, he says quietly. 4 carts and strong hands await to carry the grain, and the mint scales stand ready to weigh your silver. Delay is for disobedience. You step back, knees unsteady. You think of your children, shivering in the cottage, clutching a thin quilt. You think of your wife, eyes bright with unspoken fear. You taste the tang of desperation and pride mingled on your tongue. To redeem even one verdict would offer scant relief, but refusal means permanent loss. That plot where your father's ash tree grew, the corner your grandfather's initials carved into the rail. Behind you, the murmurs grow. Some tenants pledge to borrow on interest, others turn away, heads bowed. You feel the weight of their gazes upon you, as though each expects you to lead or to falter. You imagine the carts arriving at your gate, the grain heaped in sacks, the silver clinking in the clerk's coffer. You imagine the field restored to your plow, a narrow slice of hope amid so much taken. At last, you draw a slow breath, lifting your chin. You step forward once more and place a small purse of 6 pence upon the ledger's edge. The clerk lifts a bushel measure, tips in 4 bushels of barley and 2 of oats, and hands you a narrow strip of parchment, your redemption writ. The seal of the king's lion is pressed warm into its wax. You hold it as though it were a priceless gem, and indeed it is, no mere piece of paper, but the thin lifeline to your heritage. Yet even as relief blooms in your chest, you know it is but a fragment. The rest of your fields lie beyond this single verdict, still claimed by lordly writ. The clerk bows and withdraws, the men-at-arms file past you, and the banner of the king's rose flutters away on the breeze. In the courtyard, the tenants applaud softly, a muted clatter of hope and sorrow. You step aside, burying the redemption writ in your tunic, and meet Marin's gaze. She offers a wry, trembling smile, and you clasp her hand. Beyond the gatehouse, the horizon gleams with green fields, one narrow strip now yours again, awaiting the plow. You taste the promise of sweat and birth of new furrows. Yet, in your mind echo the steps of the king's riders, the sharp ink of the clerk's quill, the cold weight of every writ you have carried. As you lead Branna back across the reclaimed field, dawn's light gilding her mane, you wonder, is this fragile slice of freedom worth the debt it has cost? And will you ever truly hold ground that has known so many claims? Imagine the late afternoon of St. Mary's Nativity, 1332. A golden haze drapes the valley, turning the church spire to burnished copper as you walk the path from your cottage toward the abbey's precinct. In your arms you carry a basket of freshly churned butter and a loaf of coarse rye, an offering pledged long ago, when your father's rents to the monks were steadfast and your grandfather's vow to St. Dunstan was honored in full. These days the abbey seems to grow ever larger, its stone walls climbing higher, its gardens fenced tighter, its barns swelling with tithes from parishes near and far. Last Michaelmas, you settled your own tithe, 1/10 of all you produced, and thought that would bind you to the rhythms of harvest and prayer. Yet when you rounded the hedge road to the west field, there you found a new earthen bank heaped across your furrows, beyond which the monks' fences snaked into your barley. Now you stand before the abbey's great gates, worn hinges groaning as you push them wide. Within the courtyard, the scent of mulberry leaves and drying basil mingles with the acrid smoke of torches lit for vespers. Monks in hooded robes drift through arcades, chanting plain song that trembles against the cloister walls. At the chapter house door, the cellarer and a clerk await you, robes pressed, tonsured heads inclined. "Brother Lucian, sir," the cellarer says, voice gentle yet firm, "we greet you in peace. Yet the abbey's surveyors report that your west meadow lies within our domain, as defined by the bull of Innocent IV of 2 years past. Please present your lease or your writ of tenure." You reach into your doublet for the small sheaf of parchments you guard, your lease from 20 years ago, renewed by your grandfather under the old abbot, the life interest charter you paid dearly to secure, the list of tithes you rendered every October. The cellarer's eyes flick over each document, parchment edges curled and ink faded. He sets them aside. "Forgive me," he says, voice low, "but these pertain only to customary rents. The bull granted our house the right to enclose all lands up to the bend of the brook. It is not your holding but ours by papal privilege. We are bound to protect our patrimony." You swallow, tasting bile. You step onto the chapter house threshold, slabs of blackened marble warmed by low rays of sun that peek through clear-story windows. The harvest light glitters on the carved capitals, monks at labor, saints in flight, grapes dripping from stone vines. At the high table, the abbot himself sits beneath a canopy of crimson damask, his mitre crowned with gold thread. "Brother," he intones, voice echoing on stone, "you claim this meadow as yours. Show me the boundary as your father left it, mark the stakes that bore his mark." You guide him outside, past the rows of ancient yew, to where the fence has severed your field in two. The earth on the abbey's side is freshly turned, the wooden posts still green, the wire binders glinting. A ditch runs between, lined with brambles and rank grass. "This bank," you say, voice shaking, "did not stand in my father's time. He tilled these seams and set stakes where these brambles now grow." You kneel and brush away dead leaves, uncovering a rough-hewn post carved with your family's mark. The wood is weathered but intact. The abbot inclines his head. "It is old," he concedes, "yet the bull's language overrules local custom. Our right is supreme, above all secular claims." You rise, cloth damp at your knees from the dew. "That bull," you protest, "was granted for lands 10 leagues west, beyond the fen, not this low meadow where my sheep have grazed since I was a boy." The cellarer passes you a parchment bound in green ribbon, a notice of suit in the bishop's court, setting a date for Inquisitio Juris, a legal inquiry into the boundary. "We shall settle this by judgment," he says. In the still air, you hear the chanting cease, the iron clasps of the chapter house door closing. The abbey's hounds bay somewhere behind the walls. You touch the carved post once more, as if to claim it by will, but feel only rough bark beneath your fingers. You pull the butter from your basket and press it into the cellarer's palm. "I have no wish for strife with the house of Saint Benedict," you say, voice small, "but this is all I have." His eyes soften. "In the bishop's court, mercy may temper rigor. Prepare your witnesses, the miller, the reeve, the elder Hedda who cleaves wood on that bend. Present them well." You turn to go, basket light now, heart heavy. The abbey's stone shadows lengthen at your back. Between you and your barley field stands papal privilege and a suit that may drag on through harvests yet to come. As you walk the long road home, the church bells begin the Angelus, each toll a reminder of your debts, to Crown, to Lord, and now to God's own servants. In your mind, the boundary post's famished stump burns with memory, and you taste the acrid smoke of conflict yet unresolved. Imagine it is the summer solstice, 1332, and the long day's heat softens into a warm dusk. In the shelter of the old oak copse, where once only the wind whispered among knotted roots, a dozen of you gather in secret. Your plowshares lie half buried at the clearing's edge, tools silenced for this night of purpose, not of toil. The air trembles with the promise of thunder, and the scent of crushed hay drifts on the breeze. You see familiar faces in the ring of lantern light: Tom the miller, whose wheel once ground your grain; Etta the widow, whose cheese you bartered; Jonas, who, though grown now, remembers the day his father lost the orchard to debt. Each bears the marks of the year's trials: haggard eyes, sun-leathered skin, children clinging at their heels. Yet tonight, in the hush, you feel a different pulse, a strain of resolve that rises in unison. At the center, you kneel before a low stump crowned by a blade of wheat, once your father's boundary post, now your rallying symbol. You place upon it a scrap of vellum, a petition, writ in trembling hands, calling for relief from ancient dues, for fair redress in manorial and ecclesiastical courts, for the restoration of fields seized by every hidden clause and obscure statute. Each of you signs with a simple mark, a cross, a handprint in ink, a chip from a nail hammered into the farm gate. A hush falls as you lift your heads. The scribe among you, Elstan, who once served in the bailiff's clerk house, holds high a scrap of charcoal and proclaims the oath. By this pledge, we bind ourselves to stand as one, to share seed and hearth, to aid the widow and the orphan, to resist no man's sword but to oppose every writ that steals our birthright. In solidarity, we claim our rights before God and before man. You echo the words, voice low but unwavering. Around you, the oak's branches stir as though in blessing. A distant clap of thunder rolls across the fields, and you sense in that sound both warning and promise. As the meeting ends, you share what little you can, bread crumbled upon a plank, a cup of sour ale passed from hand to hand, a handful of barley seed for planting where the earth remains yours. Each gift carries more than sustenance. It is an act of defiance, a spark kindled in the dark. When you part, torchlight bobbing along the cart track, each returns to hearth and plough, to child and cow, but you carry with you the ember of this night. You will attend the bishop's court together, you will petition the king's council, you will help each other pay fines, even if it costs the last ewe or the last sheaf. In the days that follow, rumors of this gathering stir throughout the shire. A petition arrives at the county seat. Neighbors once divided by grievance now share gossip and a cautious hope. When the steward, hastily convened, finds his tally board challenged by this common voice, he hesitates before chalking another fine. And in the dawn light, as you stand once more by your father's post, its carving now half obliterated by time, you feel the grain of the wood beneath your palm. It is the same boundary you defended in every scene of loss, yet now it marks not only what you have lost, but what you will reclaim together. So ends this chronicle, not with blade or siege, but with quiet resolve under the ancient oak. For in unity you discover a power older than any charter, an unbreakable bond, woven of shared seed and shared will, capable of reclaiming land, dignity, and hope.